Today I want to talk about real property reports. Specifically, what is a real property report and do I need one to sell my home? At the end of this video, I'll let you know how you can get step-by-step instructions on ordering a real property report and a compliance certificate. Welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Streu TV. I'm Dwight Streu, the Dwight Streu Real Estate Team. Streu TV is your best resource of real estate information, tips, and tricks for home sellers and buyers. In Alberta, most real estate transactions will include two standard clauses that relate to the need for a real property report. The first clause says that the seller represents and warrants to the buyer that the current use of the land and buildings complies with the existing municipal land use bylaw and any restrictive covenant on title. Well, the only way to prove that property does in fact comply relates to the second clause, which says the seller or the seller's lawyer will provide the buyer a real property report showing the current improvements on the property according to the Alberta Land Surveyors Association Manual of Standard Practice, with evidence of municipal compliance or nonconformance, confirming the seller's warranties about the land and buildings. So the real property report is a survey of the land and the improvements on the land. Improvements include things like a house, garage, deck, fencing, and so on. Now, as per the clause, the RPR needs to be current. That means it needs to show the property as it is today. Now, if you have one from when you bought your home and it's 10 or 15 years old, but you've not made any changes outside to the property, well, you can still use it. However, if you have one that's only a year old, but you've added a deck or a garage, well, sorry, but it's no longer current. So you'll need to get a new one or get your current one updated. Now, a real property report is required for all single detached properties and bare land condominiums. Conventional condominiums, however, do not require a real property report. Now, the real property report can be ordered from an Alberta land surveyor and costs are typically in the $500 to $700 for a single family home. Once you receive it, you'll need to send it to the city or the county with a request for a compliance certificate. They're going to look it over to determine if you have all the necessary permits for improvements and that they're all located within the property according to the regulations. Then they're going to advise you if your property complies or is non-conforming, or neither. Now, non-conforming means the property doesn't comply with current requirements, but it did when the property was built, so there's no need to make it comply to current regulations. Now, if the property neither complies or is non-conforming, the municipality will tell you why. This is not uncommon and could be for a variety of reasons, such as not having a permit for a deck or sunroom or even a hot tub. Yeah, even outdoor hot tubs require a permit. Now, it could also be you have a fence or a planter or a retaining wall and it's encroaching on city properties. These are just a few common examples, but there's really lots of reasons why your property may not comply. So, what should you do if your property doesn't comply? Do you need to make it comply? Well, maybe or maybe not. So here's where things get a little tricky. If you've already accepted an offer with this clause, then the buyer will likely require that you make the property comply. In some cases, this can be easy, but in others, it can be really expensive. So it is important that you don't sign an offer warranting the property complies if you don't in fact know whether it complies or not. So to protect yourself, you should put in a seller's condition so that if the property doesn't comply, you're not going to be in a position where you have to make it comply at any cost. But frankly, the easiest and best practice is to get the real property report and the compliance certificate done before you accept an offer. That way, you and the buyer both know what the issues are and you can negotiate accordingly. Now, just because the property doesn't comply doesn't mean you have to make it comply. The city won't force you to make it comply. And as long as the buyer accepts the property the way it is, you don't have to make it comply. However, it is really important that such an agreement between the buyer and the seller is agreed to in writing on the offer to purchase contract. That way there can be no misunderstandings when the file goes to the lawyers. So let me give you an example of how this looks in practice. We recently listed a property for sale and assisted the owner in obtaining the real property report and the City of Edmonton compliance. Well, as it turns out, the fence at the front of the property encroaches on city property, and the cost to obtain an encroachment agreement with the city is about $9,000. Now, had we accepted an offer before knowing this, the buyer could have and likely would have forced our client to get the encroachment agreement regardless of the cost. However, now that we're aware of this, we'll tell the buyer that they need to accept the fence as is, and most buyers will agree to do that. But if not, at least we still have the option of moving the fence so that it does not encroach and we can move the fence for much lower cost than $9,000. Now, there is an alternative to providing a real property report called title insurance, and I don't want to get into the specifics of all what that entails, but it is a little bit cheaper and certainly less hassle. However, most buyers still prefer the real property report because it shows them exactly what they're getting. With title insurance, they could be inheriting a problem they don't even know about. Now, if you would like instructions on how to order a real property report and the city compliance, or if you have any questions about what I've discussed in this video, please give me a call at 780-462-5002. That's 780-462-5002, or send me an email at dwight@dwightstreu.com. So, hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.